Summer School 2022. I'm very happy to welcome tonight Marianne Plano. I'm going to read briefly first a short biography. Marianne is a French graphic designer and developer based in Brussels, trained with the Luz Collective for work questions digital tools through instructive and dedicated practice of programming. Marianne is also part of the design department of Heta in Lyon, a partner institution for summer school at school. Her lecture tonight is titled The Designer, the Developer, and the Control, Computer Graphics, and When to Let It Go. I'm going to read briefly from the material which is also on this page, so I hope you will also take the material. So the abstract starts like this. What is the body of all the design if the website cannot load? What is the point of all the design if the website cannot load? What is the point of your programming if you cannot make it work? What about the trash, your 3DS images? It loads like a charm. What about the trash, the device that can't load them quick enough? Developer, me, designer, me, late night talking. A tale of two beauties. The designer and the web developer are both craftsmen of accessibility. They serve the same master, content. Writers, bloggers, users, you should be grateful for having such a staff supporting, spreading, and designing your words and images. All of us staying up late for the world to best read about what's going on in your mind or in your businesses. Whether that's worth it or not shall not be discussed in the present text. That said, if designers and developers serve the same master, they don't follow the same rules, they don't obey the same codes, and they don't prioritize the same things, we shall say they don't seek the same beauty, which often turns them into opponents, each of them being ignorant of the other's beautiful and only building websites that fulfill his specific goal. I'll stop here. Thank you so much for being here with us. The floor is yours.
Okay. Thanks a lot for having me. Maybe first I'll just introduce a bit myself. This is my website. I'm a graphic designer and a developer, and also a teacher at Heta, and I teach web development for graphic designers. So like the basics of web development for designers. And what is important to say, I think, for the next lecture is that sometimes I work as a full designer and developer for websites, and sometimes I'm just a developer. So it means that I partner with like other graphic designers that they make the design and I make it work and I turn it into code. And during my practice of this, I noticed that there was a lot of friction because graphic designers don't really get how web design works sometimes, and web developers don't really get like what's the point of graphic design and what matters to graphic designers. So since I have a background in graphic design, I kind of see and know when I work with a graphic designer what matters to them. And I'm going to try to explain in the following lecture all these friction points and how to make it work a bit better, actually. Because I think right now, like this relationship between developers and designers is just starting, kind of. Before recently, I mean, it was only developers who used to make websites, and now graphic designers are getting involved in the process. And so, yeah, it creates a lot of misunderstanding and so on. So just to say also, because I'm going to talk about books, how to make books, because I think a lot also of the friction comes from the fact that designers are trained in print, and then when we go to web, it's like, what the fuck, they don't get it so much. But what is interesting is that the meeting of these two professions kind of creates interesting challenges for each of them. Okay, so yeah, I also make books, so yeah, that's what I made. Wow, great, that's nice. And basically, I mostly make websites because it's what I like most to do. But I also like to do books, and it's like completely different skills that it requires, even though everything is graphic design. Okay, so I drew this, so I hope this is okay. I hope this will kind of work, but yeah, if it doesn't, it's fine. It's kind of a test. Okay, so I'll start with an introduction because actually I had made a full course about like those issues, but my computer of an unknown brand crashed and I lost everything like a week ago. So hopefully I didn't, or 2 weeks ago, so hopefully I didn't have to come for also for the board because it got cancelled because I lost everything. So I kind of got very pissed because like the computer was very expensive and I trusted him so much and trusted it so much and then it just broke. So then it went dead. So it was just a very big loss and someday it just didn't turn on. And it turns out I lost everything. I lost like 4 months of work. 4 months is not that much, but still, I was a bit pissed that everything that I've been writing so well and I put myself really into it and it's gone. So then they were like, hey, do you have any chance to back up? I did it. So my advice is like, buy computers you can fix. So this is the present computer because I fixed a part of it. So it's kind of nice to know your tool and like when something goes wrong, you can just fix it yourself and not have to like go to the Apple store and like get completely, and stay away from Apple. Or just recent fruits. Old fruit I shall always respect because this is Apple and this is great. But now they have this policy where they solder like motherboard to hardware, which is exactly why I lost all my work. So like, just be careful. Okay, so this is about the designer and the developer. So designer has round glasses, developer has square glasses, but the square glasses are a bit lamer and like, Okay, so this is like the legend of the following drawing. So there's a lot of kind of this bias coming from the two professions. Like techies are a bit like, oh, you're like a hipster, you want to do this design, but it's so complicated and so data costing, I'm not going to do that. And like, also designers are very spiteful, like you and geek, you don't know anything about fonts or about anything. So like, just do my design and shut up. So there's this kind of vibe that can go on, not always of course, but that can go on, which will be the start of my conference. And this is like what I'm aiming to do is that everyone gets friends and like the web design gets better. Okay, so first of all, I don't know if any of you are familiar with web design, but I'm going to have to a bit explain how it's about and how it works, so I can like just narrow down the problems. Okay, so it's going to be very short, and like please interrupt if you don't get anything or if that's abstract or anything, I'll stop and explain again. Okay, so a website is basically spread across two computers. So just out of simplicity, I just made like the client computer look like a laptop and the server computer look like a rack, but it could be different. It's the software that's on it that matters. But anyway, so a website is like a software, basically, that is across two computers. So you already have two computers involved. So the server is the computer that hosts the website. So basically, it's just a computer where there are files, and then you can ask for those files and then see the websites. The client is the computer that reads the website. So it's this, basically. It's asked for the file, it downloads the file, it renders the file. So that's a lot to do. What does that is a browser, and a browser is like a super complicated software with like millions of lines of codes and like a lot of people involved in it. Okay, so basically it goes like that. The client is like, hey, could I get this page, please? But actually it works like that. You just type the URL in the browser. And then the server is like, sure, yeah, here are the file, and then your website loads. When your website loads, it's because you download it. So you download it, and then the computer reads it. So you're downloading a bunch of files, and in the case of a static website, which is like the basic form of website, which is what I'm teaching actually, is like you only have like an HTML file, and then maybe CSS file, which are the style, and then maybe a script, and a font that is there .ttf, which I'm going to talk about later. And then, you can see a pretty website. Wait. One client? Ha ha ha. No, there's a lot of clients. And this is where like the problem starts because you have to make sure that your website is going to work on all of them. And that's just a sample, because actually there's so many of them. So there's one website for a lot of clients. So one of the first misunderstandings between designers and developers that we'll talk about is Windows. Not Windows, of course, not Windows the operation system, but Windows as a window, like that there's involving. Okay, so I guess most of the misunderstanding comes from the fact that graphic designers are trained in print. So it means they're trained to make posters, they're trained to make books, so like all of this. So a book, this is a book. You see that a book actually has a fixed size, and then you can compose in this size, and it also has a fixed text that is fixed before, and that the designer can get to work on. Then you have a copy of this book. As you can see, it's exactly the same, and another copy of this book. So it's still exactly the same. So there, you see fixed size, so width and height are set, and then of course they're set forever because the reading device of a book is a book itself. Even when you look at a book and a PDF, it's like fixed ratio, you can see the pages, and then nothing's changing. So you have full control on the reading device. And as a graphic designer who makes book, I can tell that like choosing size is like a huge deal. That you spend hours, you like cut a little piece of paper and you look at them and you're like, oh, what's the perfect size for my book? And then, yeah, so that's a big step. In web design, it's completely different. This is a website, this is the same website, and this is the same website. So it means that the window is always different. So you have this, and so on, and so on, and so on. So you have no control on the reading device size, which is a big difference, because graphic designers are really used to like handle the little format and not go out of it. So you have no fixed size for Windows, no fixed ratio for Windows, and it's not only this for, because basically when you work with designers, which is normal, they design like, you know, the main Windows. So like you have the smartphone, the iPad, the laptop, and the desktop. Or they can only design two. But then it's not only that, you have so many windows possible. Like this, like people use what's called split screen. It's like you look at on one side of the screen, let's say web page, on the other side like another program, and it's just like that. So this is to tell that the window can be also different than the full screen device that you have. So when you work with a designer as a developer, usually you use the PDF as a kind of base. So like the designer designs the PDF in a certain format and gives it to you, and then you have to make it into a website. So this is what a PDF looks like, and this is what the actual website looks like. So why is it like on the PDF? Well, because the PDF only covers one window size and ratio, and in reality you have endless count of window sizes and ratio. Of course you can adapt to that, but it's never exactly as it was on the first format. So like a PDF is kind of a plan, and there's room for interpretation because developers are not laser printer, in the sense that they can like set it in a different unit or be like, okay, this is what it should look like on a laptop, what does it look like on a bigger screen, etc., etc. And you can see that I have this laptop, but like there's a lot also of ratio and the size of the screen, and etc., etc. So my advice, and like what I do now when I work together with a graphic designer, is that we just sit together in front of a big screen and just test everything. So it's like, what do you think? Focus so small, doesn't it? So everyone has to check on that and like, you know, like post, check that everything is okay. So it's really a together work actually. And it really avoids the email storm that you eventually end up with when you're not doing that, and the website isn't exactly like the PDF. So the website window depends on the user hardware. Like, I mean, if I have this, or if I have a phone, it's clearly not the same screen, so it's going to be clearly not the same website. It also depends on the user usage, like, is the user using split screen, or is the window really full size, etc., etc. And it also depends on the user software. This is just to say, like, to show how many parameters there are at stake when in web design. So, a second misunderstanding that there is between designers and developers is software. Because depending on the software, you have different images, different rendering, and so on and so on. So the first kind of software I'm going to talk about is operation system or operating systems and default parameters. I'm sorry if none of you is familiar with graphic design. It's super like design oriented. Okay, so you have the three basic OS like Mac, Windows, and Linux, and all their different versions and all the different distribution, etc., etc. So that's a lot of different software, a lot of different people who made it, a lot of different ways of interpreting the graphics, and etc. And two things that are really different depending on those software are fonts and emoji. Like you would never think that if I'm on a Mac or a PC, it's going to change anything to a website, but it actually does. So a default setting is parameters that is working when nothing is specified. So like for instance, if I'm loading a font from a software, or depending on the format, I'm loading like different formats of fonts depending on the one that the browser can use. And sometimes it doesn't make it, like the font doesn't load for whatever reason, like because, I don't know, not enough data, or because like the path has been spelled wrong, or anyway, something can go wrong and then the font isn't loaded. So then the computer, instead of saying like, no, I'm not going to load this website, where's the font? It's going to load the default font. And the default font is different for each OSs. And it's also different for distribution and the user also can change them. So it means that you can basically design a full website. And then the font, which for designer is so important, and I get how and I get why, is not going to load. So instead you have this fallback instead of errors. So it means like if the font cannot load, then the computer, instead of saying, sorry, I'm not reading that, there's no font, which could be a possibility, says, okay, I really choose Minecraft font, no worries. So then what matters most is the content, is that in a stressed network or when there's difficulty, what's going to go through is the text, basically like of a website. And the form, like the style, font, etc., works. So I like the full font personally because like they have no data cost, because when you have a font, then you have to load one more file, and they always work also. Okay, so I'm just going to explain how this works. So like, let's say I scan this font. Okay, now it's working. Let's say it doesn't work. Then I say another font, and then this font will work instead of the first one if it's on the user's computer. And then if it doesn't work, I can still specify a type of font, like for instance, sans serif. And then the sans serif default from the computer will load. And this sans serif is different for every operating system. So then, yeah, that's the sans serif. And if, let's say, there is no sans serif font, the default font will be the serif font, which is also different for systems and also versions. Like, I have a Mac, I have this sans serif default, this serif default, but if I had a newer version of the macOS operating system, then I would have a different font. So it's like partial control over the font, which is completely different than from print. Like, I mean, when you're doing print, like you're really like handling each line per line, like handling the justification and like how the text goes and everything. And like when you go to web, then you have partial control over the font. For the designer, it's like a catastrophe not to have the font like really under control. A second feature that is not always loaded is that is different across OSs is emojis. So it means that if you're on Mac, you have different smileys. If you're on Windows or Linux, you have also different smileys. Android, iOS, etc. So this is an example. This is like the same code exactly. This is the same website on 3 different computers. So this is just to show how different this can be. So actually, like it's really different from making a PDF or anything, because then the computer, depending on the software is installed on it, will interpret the code differently. Like you can clearly see there that the smileys are different, even though they're the same in the code. The fonts are different, even though it's a sans serif in the code, and also the color is different. Like you can totally see, like with the projection, it doesn't show so much, that the blues are so different. Whereas like when you work in print, like color is also a big thing, like you work with a printer to get the best color, blah, 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 blah. You can even work with someone that makes your color right in between you and the print. And there, you just say glue and you have whatever glue is available on the computer. And this is just how web design works, and you have to accept that. So like for a designer, it's terrible. I had really like this experience of someone that said, oh my god, I saw a website on someone else's computer, and I'm like, yes, but you know, it's normal actually, it shifts. Okay, something else that makes website different are browsers. So like depending on which browser you're on, it's going to be also a bit different. So you have difference in rendering. You can have the same code with different results for some properties. So it means that like you have these bits of codes that are available to use, like for instance to make the background, to make the color, etc., etc. And that some of them are not going to work on some browsers, on some versions. It's like a lot of software which I'm talking about and a lot of versions. So you have this website where you can check like if properties are okay or not. This kind of problem really demands that like designers and developers work together even ahead of the final PDF, because as a developer you know what's complicated to do, you know what's not reliable, you know what's not really well supported, and this is something you really have to like share with the designer, because you can end up with something very complicated with a lot of fallback code just to like make it work. So the role of the developer is to work so that the website is working on any software, so like it works good everywhere. But it's still going to have these tiny differences that are really hard to handle for designers. So you have two techniques to make the website work everywhere. One is called progressive enhancement. It's like you go for the simplest feature, and then for a computer that supports, you enhance. It means like you get to the more complicated feature. Or the graceful failure, which means you only support like the most recent computer and full of data and blah blah blah, and then for the others, like too bad for them, they just have to add a new computer. Okay, so this is going to be a short conclusion, and afterwards, okay, I forgot to say that, but since my computer crashed, I like developed a small like project that I was really willing to do, but I thought like, yeah, it's crashed, so I'm going to do that instead of redoing everything that I lost. So I'm going to present that afterwards. Okay, so in conclusion, different interests are at stake. Like for the designer, what matters is consistency in rendering, typographic details, and experimental form. For instance, consistency in rendering means that the website is the same everywhere. And typographic details is like that, for instance, graphic designer would like want to do, for instance, justification, which is not possible on a website because of the shifting size, and then that you cannot handle the lines. I'll explain that. Like for instance, here, okay, that's book, and you have like, you know, the line that are like certain amounts of words per line, and you have a certain amount of space, and like everything is handled so that the eye can like read pleasantly across the lines and everything. This is possible because like the text is fixed and because the format is fixed. And if you have like text that can be dynamic, for instance, you have a website that you give to clients and then they can fill it, then this is not going to work. This is just so terrible for designers. They're like, well, I can't have justification, how come? And then you're like, And also the algorithm that makes the justification in the browser is really, really bad. So you have like this big spaces everywhere and it's really bad. And you always have, when you're doing print design, to like, you have the automatic thing going on, but you always have to like go with your eye and like see little details that don't work and then just correct them, which is not possible in web design because there's too many formats and also the content can be dynamic. So you have to kind of give up on that, on the perfectly like laid out text, which is really important for book, but you cannot access that in web, which is a bit sad. And also like experimental forms means like sometimes like when you work with designers, they have an idea like I want to do that. And you're like, oh my god, I think this is so complicated, I don't want to do that. But then it kind of forces you as a dev to do it. So it's kind of interesting. Okay, so for the developers, the interests are like low data costs. So it means like when you load a website, it goes fast and there's no too many data. And also low program complexity, but it's simple because the most complicated it is, the harder to maintain it is. Like the more bug there can be. So you're always trying to keep it simple. It's like the art of programming these days is just like how to keep it simple and very efficient. So also as a developer, when you have to write a lot of code, you feel like something is wrong, like you shouldn't be writing so much for a website. And also high accessibility means that everyone with the latest device possible can access the website. So as a developer, you tend to go to like features like forms that are easily browsable for everyone. And like when you're a designer, you're more like, yeah, let's try this new stuff. And you know, like when you're a developer, you're like, no thanks, you know. So it's like, what is interesting is that the designer requires the devs thinking in order to make new form come true. So it's like, as a developer, it's interesting because you're like, how can I make this work? So that's a completely different thing than to think website from the first. It's like, okay, how can I make it work well, this form? And the other hand is like, the dev initiates the designers to programming matters and computer thinking. For instance, the fact that a website is a flow and it's not a page, and that the format is changing, and that not everything is so reliable as it would be in print, etc., etc. So it's really like a collective work from any moment, because I'm saying that because at first when I started to work as a dev for people, I would just like get the PDF and just make the website. But that's stupid, and it didn't work, and there are so many misunderstandings that now they come to me, we talk, and then we think it through, and then we try to find a way that makes it also work well, because you're still in contact with the programming and with the matter of the website, so you also have clues about what's never going to work well and what might work better. So it's kind of really interesting, this collaboration. So each profession has to lean into the other is beautiful, because for developers what is beautiful is like simplicity and like economy as well in data as well as in code, and like for designers it's like completely different. It's more like the form in itself has to fit. So now I'm just going to do a conclusion of the conclusion, which is a personal wondering and a way to like show you the project that we're working on last week. Is like, how can digital objects last? This is a big question, because sometimes when you're doing a website with lots of new features or lots of different things like animation and la 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 and a lot of different stuff, it can break. So you really have this also as a developer, you want things to last, like to be reliable. Like for instance, I'm working a lot like with the programming language for a server that I mostly work with is PHP, and there has been like a change in version. So a lot of code that I've been writing didn't work anymore. So it kind of traumatized me, and I had to go through every code that I've been writing and like correct the things that were not accepted anymore. It's just so that it works. So that's also something like that you come with time to appreciate, like this maintenance also. It's like, how can I make a website that is still going to be the same in 5 years? And that's a big problem as a developer, because sometimes I can get calls from clients like 4 years ago, like, hey, my website doesn't work, there has been an update on the server, and you're like, no, oh my god. At the same time you could say like, screw you, it's been 4 years, but you don't want to do that, you still want it to work. So that's a question that I'm asking myself now, like really in my work and like in the way I program, like how can I make it last? So last across tech progress, because you know, like computing is constantly moving, like you have all new stuff coming, stuff being like abandoned, sorry, not being too exciting, and all this thing that makes like maybe the code that you've been writing not working anymore. So it has to last across tech progress. And how can you know that something is going to stay, the technology is going to stay? It's just like feeling, or I don't have many clues about that. Or you can use old technologies that are still around, which is kind of what I'm doing now. Also, it lasts across programming fashion, because programming as anything has fashions, and like there are languages that are very fashionable at some point, so like everyone is doing them. For instance, like Node.js, which is a very fashionable language, which I did learn also when I was in my, I don't know, I want to do the most complicated phase. But anyway, you don't know because technologies are going to stay around. So how can you make it last across ever-shifting times? It's also interesting. because a book, like once it's printed, it's going to last for 50 years. How can you like imagine a website that could last this long or that are still there maybe in 10 years? Thank you. Then, sir, I just wanted to because I haven't shown much of what I do. I just wanted to show you like the project that I did thanks to my computer broke. Actually, it's just a font list. It's something like for designers. A lot of designers do that. It's like just a small website with all the fonts that I have on my computer being tested, like all the free fonts. So that's interesting because it's just like, how can I broadcast the fonts that I like and I use? And this is a static website, which means it's only HTML. It's like super simple because I want it still to be there in 10 years. And what is cool about this, so you have this like very old-fashioned stuff, like with pages, and you have to go with the arrow. You don't have, the scroll, the everlasting scroll. And I thought like, yeah, that's a great thing because everlasting scroll are also related to making you digital addict, whatever, when you're on social network, and there's still more and more. So I thought like, yeah, the arrow isn't so bad actually. So it's just basically like free fonts being tested out with like the links to the designer and links to the font. Which is cool is that I could like make a small program that would just like go through every font and just test it and generate the images and everything like just programmatically, so I don't have to fill every information I did. It's designers who did. So that's just a small project, and then I thought what would be interesting would be also to feature fonts with license that have license restricted, because this is free fonts. It means like everyone can use them and modify them and for free. But you also have fonts that have other licenses, which means like you have to pay for them and you cannot do stuff according to the license. And so I also wanted to feature them, even though I cannot make images. So I just featured some links and also places where you can discover fonts or browse fonts. Like everyone has this kind of self font list. A lot of design collective do. And what is cool is that the other part of the tool is just local. Sorry.
Did you code that by hand?
Yeah.
It's a lot
No, it wasn't that much this one. Sorry about that. Okay, so basically when I started this, it was for me, because I like also to make tools, because I guess every programmer does it. It's just like, you should make the tools for you to work. So this is just all my fonts being tested. So I can just quickly look at them and have an idea of what they look like and just decide whether I'm going to test them or not on the website. And it's also interesting because thanks to that, I can directly link the font and I don't have to copy files, because when you're making a website, you have to copy the font files to test it. This is a way to avoid that. And basically the project was that, and I just thought how can I make this list go public? And this is where this came in. So this is basically based on the same kind of code. Basically the project was that, and then I decided to make a public version, which has completely different goals. This is supposed to be fast loading, so there's no fonts in there because fonts are very heavy to load. So then it's only images, and I generated the images with and got the data with a very old program. I'm just going to show you it. This is Image Magic. It's a program like Photoshop, but in the terminal, in command line, which is really great, and it's super old. And this is a program that allows you portraits, also in the command line, that allows you to make this. So have a pixelated image and turn it into vectors. So those programs are part also of my questioning about how to make something that lasts, because they have been there forever, and also forever now, but for 20 years, which is a lot in computing. And this is also a very old program that allows you to get metadata from files. So I use that for the fonts. But I could have used much more recent program, but I on purpose made the choice to use very old programs that
I felt still had stuff to say and to do. Because like in programming we have a lot of new, but sometimes the new isn't that new actually. It's like, yes, this program already has been doing that for 20 years and very good. Like, why do you use the new library or the new thing? So for me it's kind of an interesting also question, like what technology to use and why. And yeah, and this is pure HTML, it's no server languages, and this is PHP, so it relies on a server language, and the server language can change, so this code can basically go wrong. But this one cannot, because HTML has been there since the invention of the web, and it's still the same, so everything is in pure HTML still works. So all the generating part goes in my computer, so this kind of also a safety, so that the code will still work, because I'm in charge to decide what software are not installed on my computer, and when it's on a server, you can never know. Okay. And also, like, the list is based on a list that I got when I was a student, so I just credited like all the people that like made me discover fonts or yeah, which is something I think is like important when you work with like other people's content and so on. Okay, well, that's it.
Thank you. I have a question, if I may, just to start this. Can you tell us a bit more about the department that you work right now?
Yeah, sure.
Yes. How does it work? How many, tell us more.
So the department where I work is really graphic design, so I work in bachelor. So it's like students from second and third year that I teach, and I like all my team teach. So it's basically people who have never done graphic design. So like we have this very like wide range of skills that are being taught. Like for instance, you have like this typographic class where you learn how to make typographies, how to make letters. You have classes that are more dedicated to publication and to bookmaking, because like historically the school is very, very much into bookmaking, and the master still is very much into bookmaking. So for the students that want to go on, then they have this first very good insights in how to make books, and also a lot about book culture. Like I have a colleague that teaches a class about, it's called library. It's just about looking at book and like making book. You also have a bit of theory, but not that much. It's writing, so it's like basically they learn also how to write, which is also interesting because then you can write thing and then do layout and print it in like real condition, like what it would be like in offset printing, which is like a big chance for our students, because having access to offset printing isn't that easy in every school. And also there's an illustration class, so it's kind of the whole skills of design are in a big meaning. Usually students have their preferences, so sometimes they're much more into, like for instance, typography, so they're going to be focused on that. But since it's bachelor, so they have to like success in every class, even though it's not really their thing. Yeah, and then in the master, usually they pick a school that goes more with the way in which they will to go. And for my class, it's a big question, because how do you teach graphic designers how to work with devs? Do you train them to work with dev, or do you train them to become dev themselves? Which is something that I didn't really solve. So my class is still very technical, so we see a lot of code and we make a lot of code, because I think even people, if our students are not going to become developers, it's important that they really like had their hands in it and they know what it means to make web design. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Let's open the floor. Maybe someone has other questions before we move to the discussion.
Nice, thank you. This problem of the web disappearing because the new technologies come and your website gets broken. So like recently the Internet Explorer is gone and everyone's happy about that, because if you do design, it had a very special, very annoying set of special parameters and these kind of things. But there's this, I think everyone knows about it now, there's this website, archive.org, the Internet Archive. And they have something called the Wayback Machine.
Mm-hmm.
So this is important in culture in multiple ways. So for example, in the States, this is being discussed. During the pandemic, the definition of a vaccine changed. It literally changed. A vaccine used to mean something, and because of the experimental nature of how vaccines for COVID were rolling out, on the web, those, in the non-printed version of a dictionary, that can change, and there's no way to know or say, how could you say 5 years ago what it looks like? So then there's this idea, well, there's a value for a printed library of work, but the web, which we mostly work on, doesn't have that. So the Wayback Machine in this archive.org takes snapshots. They're essentially just screenshots of old websites, so you can look back and say, well, what the heck did Facebook look like in, whenever it started in 1985? And that's the only one that I know of that's out there. Otherwise, what you're saying, other than it's HTML, you're saying, okay, this is this one that you're showing us right behind you right now, that's saved because it's HTML, but it's actually probably HTML5 and CSS3.
Yeah, but that's kind of safe compared to
if you're using server-side PHP kind of stuff.
Yeah, or everything else.
Yeah, so I don't think I have a question. It's more of a thing of like, in terms of archiving, and in terms of looking at history that's increasingly just digital and on the web, what do you in your school, or even in discussions within the art school, think of and contending with that? How to preserve the history of the changes even? Because in something like a wiki technology, those get preserved.
You have a version.
Right, and that's part of the technology, whether HTML or others, it's not.
Yeah, but I think that there's a lot that I find it a bit too much this archive Wayback Machine, because like for me, I was pissed that my website got snapped, kind of, because I wanted it to change. So you also have this, like this snapshotting at maybe things that you had imagined in a temporary state that are not. So I'm not sure that, I'm not sure that it matters so much, and I don't know what should be archived or not. And then if we're going to have still the ways of reading like files that has been written like 20 years ago, because programs are sometimes disappearing, and even the technology, like the reading device, is also disappearing. But yeah, I don't know. All I can say is that as a designer, like when I worked for print, it's such a different mindset, because you have this lasting idea. So like everything has to be perfect. So like when you work as a designer, you get the PDF back and forth, like with all tiny details that are being settled. So you really have this high expectancy over content, which in web is not the case. Is that like people like publish and then they over-publish on what they did, and like if something is wrong, it doesn't matter because you can still change it. But at the same time, I find it a bit weird, because like some things, as you say, are being erased and disappearing, but some other things that are maybe meant more as speaking are staying. So it's kind of, I don't know yet if we have figured out what the internet is for and how we should use it, because it's so, not the internet but more the web, because it's so also recent, that I guess we're still trying out some things. Yeah, I don't know. But all I can say is that like the demand behind the texts that are being written in printed is so different. It's really, really different. And also as a designer, when you work in that process and work with a copywriter and you work with a proofreader and you have all this attention being paid to the text, it has to be perfect because printing lasts. It's so, it's so different actually. And I wish we could have also, because I'm also wondering because about like how to get, would you get attached to your website for instance, because you get very much attached to books, like when you design books, you also think them as objects that people are going to keep, they're going to have, they're going to sometimes look at. Like for me, I have like very books that I have very special relationships to, and I like them, and I would be very sad if I lost them. And even if the text is being probably reprinted, I like this copy because it's my copy and it has kind of a history, or it's in this kind of collection from this period, etc. And I'm just wondering, is this, but I haven't any answer, but can you have this kind of emotional relationship to a website? It sounds a bit weird, but
Yeah,
yeah.
it's less of an object.
It's not an object, it's not, you cannot touch it, you cannot, so it's so different actually. But yeah, I find it a bit also, for us it's also a question how to archive, because when you're a web designer, you can just have a link to your website, but then sometimes the template is going to change. So then it's going to be broken.
Yeah.
So that's also something that we ask ourselves, like just, so you make screenshots, you make a bit, but
There's that's also in part too, like, because I've worked with some technology pieces in the past, and it's like some strange DVD player
yeah.
that, is part of the piece, and it's like no longer functioning, and the artist is no longer around, and you have like, this technology that you have to store somewhere, and it's not going to work, and it's a big question, so it just lives, again, almost like the snapshots of the screen. It's like, okay, I remember the picture of this, this work.
But for instance, when you think about movies, they used to be on films, but now they're still around, but they're much more reproduced. So maybe like the amount of copies stands up for, stands for the fragility of the material.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like if you have billions of copies of one movie, if one server breaks, then it's still around.
Yeah.
But I understand the question.
But how about games? They are software as well.
Yeah.
And
But I don't know anything about games, but
yeah, but this is not your design wise. Let's say Mario, for example, Super Mario. I'm sure that everybody here wouldn't like to play a version of a new design that we use nowadays. Everybody would like to do that on
they're not.
or Nintendo or even PS want to. So I would say that probably not that the technology is changing, but especially you that you're having with web design, probably the user experience is changing. So that's why we have these changes, because in the end of the day, the algorithm is there and it will work in the same computer everywhere the same, but we as people would like to see something new, or would like to use something which is more comfortable for us.
But what is interesting also is that there have been some shifts like in the way you're designing websites, but some of the technology didn't change so much since the invention of web. When you look at like websites from the 90s or 2000, they look very different than the one we have from now. But I mean, server languages did change, but like for instance the HTML or the rendering, you have new things of course, but not so much actually. So it's interesting also to see that like how can I say, like the technological change aren't everything. That actually also the design shifted, but not only because of technology. Also because of the way of using it, and like also like the way of making websites. Like that, for instance, you have like social networks and like everyone is able to make a page, which wasn't the case before. That you had to like kind of make in code to make it. So I think it's not only a matter of technical change, but also a change of use. And of course, the telephone has also changed a lot. Also, how desktop websites look. Because like you really have, for instance, which I hate because I don't hate, but for my students, for instance, I first have to work first on the laptop or desktop version because I want them to like try to like design a full screen. You have a lot of websites that have this optimal version for mobile, and like when you look at them on the desktop version, they just look like suits of mobile. And this, I find it's because also it's much easier to do as a designer. It's this technique that's called mobile first. Like if you design the mobile first, then it's much easier to do big screen because any other way around is much tougher. But it's also more interesting because you have way more space to work with when you're working on a desktop. And also for me, I like to encourage like people to use computers instead of phones because like computers are much more open. Like you can, for instance, have access to a terminal, which you cannot on a mobile phone. You can have access to how the files are stored, so you're much closer to like the technique of the computer and how it actually works than you are on a mobile phone. Which like you never know like when your data is stored, like this is you don't know like how the folder is organized and like the full operating system is really made to make that blurry and to make that like it's not a machine, it's just working kind of magically. And also like on computers you have more possibilities of the local kind of computing life that you don't have like in the mobile phone because mobile phones tend to become like this kind of terminal that you use to access different servers, and actually you cannot really store many things on them or do many things software-wise on them. For instance, you can't program with your mobile phone, you can program with your computer. So you have access if you want, but also I really this is not the only problem you have to know how to, but you have access to like the material and how the computer is made, which you do not have on mobile phone. Yeah. So that's why I force my students to make this up and not mobile first.
I have some thoughts, maybe you can take it as a question, or maybe just.
I used to stumble all the time on Stumble Upon. When I was young, I don't know if you know, Stumble Upon was like just a website that kind of, I think it as a like basic algorithm that was there. That you choose some interest and then you can hit stumble, it show you some website. It can be a video, it can be useless website and stuff like that. So I really stayed a lot there, like a lot. And I explored a lot of websites and I was like saving some and doing some just.
It was like a pinboard, like where you can save
Not actually, you would like them, and, yeah, you would do some like full and stuff like that, but it wasn't like, it wasn't so big, but it worked. And then after some time, it stopped working. I think they sold it or something like that. But through that, I saved a lot of websites. And I know the experience I had with that, and also the experience that I had with those small, like just links to websites that I saved. And now if I go back, most of them won't work. I understand that. And I enjoyed a lot of websites that use Flash Player, that you don't have that. And somehow, while you were presenting, I got the feeling that between the progressive enhancement and wasteful failure, I think there is more to that because now we have WebGL, we can go in 3D websites and we can have that experience also, not all of them.
I don't think that it's super heavy, like it makes
Yeah,
your computer bigger.
I understand all of that, but people are still doing it and we can still experience that. And somehow I think that the thinking about web development and like just say that this will not work and you have to just use everything so it can stay on time versus my experiences with all those websites will be, at least for me, would be like better love and bust than just not have the experience at all. And I just want to, maybe it's a question, but I just want to know how do you think that the progress will go, or what about the compromises we make for the grateful failure? And I understand that it's not always the full capacity of audience in one website. Sometimes it's a private group, sometimes it's like a target specified devices you want to reach.
But also behind data costs, there's also like processing costs and like how energy costs. So like when you are broadcasting or downloading a website that has, for instance, watching a video or downloading a website with like 3D. It also costs more, but also in terms of power, like in electricity and everything. And I feel that this will probably become an issue. So there's kind of also a limit, which is like, as everything else, like a material limit to what you can broadcast and get, and also like what are the kind of environmental costs of this technology progress. For me, I really like when it's like minimal, when you really have this like, all technologies and like that it still works and it doesn't cost a lot, because this is, I think, I don't know, probably people would disagree, of course, like other programmers would disagree, but for me, the practicing of code does entail this. Like when you're doing code, you're always going to the most simple, and if you're not, it's that you're doing it bad. So I also think that in terms of, but I also have to grow up like with the new things, like for instance, like new features, new stuff accessible, because then, yeah, it's also nice to have new things. But I'm kind of wondering if there's not still a cost that is there. For instance, I'm just going to take this one example. There's this new format that you probably all have seen. It's called WebP. It's like an image format that Google made up, and that is really, really like great because it's super light. So it allows image to travel through networks at less cost, because then images are less big. But then just the processing power is shifted from the bandwidth or like the downloading to your computer, because then it's harder for the computer to read. So you always have this, I don't know. And for me, I mean, it's a big mistake and failure if I make a website and people's computer take off when they read it. But I guess like people would disagree. And for instance, like the one that I made for I'm just going to take this one example. This, to extract the font info, I could have used a completely much newer technology that is based on Node.js, for instance, instead of using like the good old-fashioned command line program. And I was like, why would I do it? Because I can do it at much less cost and like much more easily with an older technology. But I don't know if this is the right way. You can never know like what's going to last and what's not. But it's kind of good to see that there are some programs that are still around, even though they're making, I don't know. But I'm really not. I guess that there's two, like other programmers are much more into like buying the newest thing, and trying the newest stuff. Like, and I'm really not like that. But it's just a, I don't know.
It's the way.
Yeah, could be different.
Any other question, maybe? Can I have one? You can get that kind of option on the website, actually.
Yeah?
I mean, for instance, it happened to us, and we have this vintage website,
You do.
2006. So it is like custom codes. Last edition we had a crash, actually just before the summer school, everything.
Yeah.
And we had hosted in the US. It was a huge operation to try to find out what happened to it, actually.
Mm-hmm.
The company that designed the code doesn't have designers that know the code anymore. It had moved. Then it was like a research to find them out, We found one, he was in Germany working for a company here. So it was a week, and then it was just a small glitch actually. And then when we fixed it, we are still on it. This is the problem. And whenever we go to a designer to change it, they open a big screen and it's me, Vanya, and someone else who works there, and it's okay. It's like, no, we love it. So it's still there. It's still there. It barely accommodates everything. I mean, we just extend and just stretch this, stretch that. But I mean, right now we are working with a designer. Maybe we will finally get rid of it or something, but it will still be there as an archive. but you can get attached to it actually, I think, and they become objects and more than objects. I mean, you have this growing development of NFTs and of everything that's going on with the digital and whatever. So I think we are going toward a new era when web designers will no longer be trained as graphic designers in publishing. You know, this is, I think, there are limitations which will go ahead, I think. I mean, specifically here, for instance, if you study design, web is not, I think, at all introduced.
Yeah.
So it's interesting also to hear your lecture, and I just want to thank you for sharing your work with us. And just to give these remarks, I will have a question at this point.
Okay, thanks. And I just wanted to say, because I didn't say that I'm not professionally trained as a developer or programmer. I'm self-taught kind of. So also I never worked like in a really, like in a web design, how do you say, corporation? So it's really like, yeah, no, but it's also to say like about trends and technologies and stuff. It's really like, I'm like making my stuff in my garage, and like probably there are other things going. It's more like, for me it's closer to like craft work than to like, I don't know, huge. It's always small websites for like small demands. It's never like, I'm not running YouTube, So it's like, and this really like, what I try to give my students that I really have with code is like this playfulness that you can basically achieve anything if you're like really motivated enough, and like it's really like building machines. So we really have this thing like, I mean, like people who opens up clock art, it's really like this kind of because I know I've been hearing a lot of like lecture about the digital sometimes, and I feel like sometimes people miss the point that what you like is really like this playfulness of the technique and this ability to build a machine, and it's not like you're shifting. I mean, it's not a complete shift. It stays a machine actually. It's the same thing as, I don't know. Yeah. So I think it's interesting to also see from that point of view of really having fun, and it's kind of weird because the student when they're at like, ugh, and then they kind of get it how it can be very, because the entry level is kind of high because you have to. I have a colleague that says it's like crossing the wall of code, and it's kind of this. But once you crossed it, it becomes much more playful, I guess. And this is something I really want to. I have a lot of fun programming and making websites, and this is like something I feel, because you always have this techie side and people are overdoing it, like I'm so clever at programming. It's not like that actually. It's much more simple and much more fun than this. It's not like you're building, I don't know. Yeah, it's like that, it's a bit, yeah. So yeah, that's for finish.
Thank you very much again. Thank you.
Thanks for listening.